Okay, so we're going to pick back up. My apologies for that break. This is the beginning of competency 4. So where we left off a second ago, we were looking at the two types of cells, the prokaryotic and the eukaryotic cells. We said prokaryotic cells, those are bacteria, and they do not have a nucleus or organelles, but they do have ribosomes. Okay, so the little dots in here are ribosomes. Ribosomes make proteins like enzymes, which the bacteria do need. Bacteria do have a cell wall. They do have a membrane. They do have DNA, but you see here it's circular DNA, but it is not in the nucleus. Okay? Eukaryotic cells, on the other hand, they do have a nucleus. They do have organelles, and it includes plant cells, animal cells, protist, and fungi. Okay? So the organelles that we need to know, of course, we'll just go back here. Make sure that in your animal cell, you know, your nucleus, that's where the DNA is located. The mitochondria, which is right here, carries out cellular respiration. You have the smooth and the rough ER. Rough ER has ribosomes attached to it. Smooth ER does not. It makes lipids. You have the Golgi apparatus, which is kind of like the UPS store, so it modifies, packages, distributes our proteins. You have lysosomes, which are these teeny tiny little dots here. They are the recycle bins of the cell. Peroxisomes are our detox centers. Centrioles help with cell division, and they're only in the animal cell. If we look over here at the plant cell, what's different about them is that in addition to everything that we just mentioned, minus the centrioles, they have a large vacuole for storing water, and the chloroplast is where we carry out photosynthesis. Okay? So again, when we look at the difference in the plant cell, they have a cell wall, they have chloroplast, then they have this large vacuole where they store all their water and nutrients. This is just another rundown of the major organelles that you need to know. Of course, your cell membrane controls what goes in and out. Mitochondria does cellular respiration, makes your energy. Chloroplast is where we do photosynthesis. The cell wall is there for protection, and again, it's only in our plant cells. Okay. I think most of us do pretty well on organization. So remember, the smallest category is cell. Then if you put a bunch of cells that look alike together, then you have a tissue. You put several tissues together, you get an organ. Put several organs together, you get a system. And then, of course, you put everything else together and you get the organism. An organ in us could be a bone. It could be your heart. It could be your brain. And, of course, in a plant, it could be a leaf or a flower or a stem. Okay, so these same things apply to plants and animals. When we look at how things move across the membrane, we know the cell membrane controls what enters and leaves, and it's semi-permeable, meaning that it lets some things go through, but it keeps others out. And in the cell, or in the body, really, everything wants to be equal. So we're looking for equal concentrations inside the cell and outside the cell. And so I know you understand what equilibrium is. We've talked about that quite a bit. The way that happens is through either active or passive transport. So right here, we're looking at passive transport, which is high to low, meaning that we don't need any energy. So no ATP is needed. Diffusion is just when stuff goes from high to low. So if you spray perfume in one part of the room, the perfume is going to diffuse from where you sprayed it to the other side of the room. So stuff moves from high to low, okay? Facilitated diffusion means the same thing, except we're using a channel protein, okay? So we're going through a membrane and it's got a channel protein. And again, it's still no energy. And then osmosis is when water moves from high to low. And so that's what we have down here. So water is so important to us and we care about where it goes. There are 3 different types of solutions that we have: hypotonic, hypertonic, and isotonic. The prefix hyper means more. So hypertonic solutions are strong and concentrated. Hypotonic solutions are very weak. And isotonic solutions are equal to each other. Okay? So if we put an animal cell in a hypotonic solution, it's going to explode. Okay? And so remember, we've heard of athletes in our area actually dying of drinking too much water because their cells began to explode because water was rushing in, okay? What we want inside of an animal is an isotonic environment. So if you get dehydrated and go to the emergency room, they're going to give you a drip of an isotonic solution. So it's going to be a mild salt solution, which is equal to your body fluid so that water goes in and out equally. Okay, so just as much goes in as comes out. Hypertonic solutions shrivel things up. So I think most of you have probably poured salt onto a slug before and watched it dry up, okay? And that was, the salt was hypertonic to the slug, and so it took all of its water out. Plant cells, on the other hand, they like hypotonic solutions. So when you water your plants, they get turgid, okay? Plant cells are just kind of flaccid in an isotonic, and then they shrivel up through plasmolysis in a hypertonic. So just remember that salty and hyper dries things out, okay? So from low to high, you must buy. So remember, this is describing active transport. So active transport means that we're moving from a low concentration to a high concentration. So these diamonds, we only have 2 of them up here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down here. So if we're going to go from low to high, we have to put energy in, and that's called active transport. Up here in this picture, you have endocytosis, which is the cell eating a big particle. This is active transport too, and it needs ATP as well. Down here we have cell division. So there are 2 types, mitosis and meiosis. Remember me telling you mitosis, your toe is your body part. So this makes new body cells, okay? These cells down here are genetically identical to this one up here, okay? So we're going to use prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, okay? This is meiosis, making the cells that made me, which are the egg and sperm cells. These 4 cells down here are not identical to this one up here. If this one had 46 chromosomes, these down here would only have 23. And so that's why you have 2 divisions. You have prophase 1, metaphase 1, anaphase 1, telophase 1, prophase 2, metaphase 2, anaphase 2, telophase 2. So just make sure you know your mitosis and your meiosis. Go back to your competency sheets there, okay, the ones I gave you in class. Competency 5 is genetics, which is what many of you told me that you were very uncomfortable with. So we're going to go through this one a little bit slower. I think the majority of you can do a Punnett square, okay? When you're setting the Punnett squares up, you put the alleles for parent number 1 on one side, the alleles for parent number 2 on the other side, and then you just play tic-tac-toe, okay? In this case, we have complete dominance, so purple flowers would be big P, and purple flowers can also be big P, little p. The only way we can get white flowers is to have little p. Genotype is this right here, what kind of gene you have. Phenotype is physical appearance, what it looks like. Okay, so your genotypes can be homo or hetero. If they're homo, they're the same. So big P, little p. If they're hetero, they're different. That means big P, little p. Okay. 2 organisms can have the same phenotype but different genotypes. Okay. So if we're looking at one of Mendel's pea plants, purple flowering plants could be big P or big P, little p. And you can't tell the difference by looking at them. And you cannot look at a purple flower and tell if it's big P or big P, little p. The way that you would figure it out is to do what we call a test cross. And if you had a purple plant and you didn't know what it was, you would cross it back with a white one with little p. If your flower was big P, little p, and you crossed it with a white one, little p, half of your offspring would also be white, okay? So if you had a purple plant and you didn't know what it was, you'd cross it back with a white one. If you got white offspring, you knew it was this. If you got all purple offspring, you would know it was this. Okay, you may want to do a little square to help make a little more sense to you. Mendel's laws are segregation, independent assortment. Segregation applies to monohybrid crosses, which a monohybrid cross is this right here, the 4-boxer. Okay. Independent assortment applies to the dihybrid crosses, which those are the big ones, the ones that have 16 boxes. Okay. When we have codominance, we have 2 alleles that are both dominant. So if Big B was black and Big W was white, the mixture would be checkered or striped or polka dotted, whatever you want to call it. You would see both black and white. Incomplete dominance is the pink example. Okay, so remember the apostrophes represent the recessive allele. So if big R is red, little r is white, big R will be pink. Multiple alleles means that you have 3 alleles. So for blood typing, we have the A and the B and the O. Okay. Sex linkage means that the traits are on the X chromosome, and boys are going to get the trait more often. When you look at pedigrees, if pretty much the only thing that you have shaded are squares, then that means that you're going to have that sex-linked trait, okay? I think this is where we are the most confused when it comes to competency 5, and this has to do with protein synthesis. Genes code for proteins, okay? The reason that we look the way we do is because of the DNA that we have. And a gene is simply a segment of DNA that codes for a protein that gives us a trait. So, when you look at your reflection in the mirror, the physical characteristics that you see, staring back at you are because of the different genes that you have and the different proteins that are being made, okay? So I want you to think about your hair color just for a minute. So melanin is our skin pigment, and it's our hair pigment as well. So those of you that have really, really, really dark hair, you have genes that cause you to make a lot of melanin, which is the skin or hair pigment. Those of you that have blonde hair or very, very light colored hair, you have genes that cause you to not make a lot of melanin. Or you actually may have a malfunctioning melanin gene where you don't make the protein in those cells. And so when we think about traits, we're thinking about proteins that are being made inside of our cells. The issue is that DNA is found in the nucleus and it never leaves the nucleus. But think about where proteins are made. They're made on the ribosomes. So what we have to do is get the code from DNA out to the ribosome, okay? And I use a lot of cooking analogies, and this reminds me of when somebody asks me for a recipe. So my daughter has a really awesome chocolate cake recipe, and it's in one of my favorite cookbooks. And recently, one of her little buddies that she bakes with very often wanted a copy of that recipe. Well, obviously, I was not going to give Mayor Palmer's friend my cookbook. So what we did, we took the cookbook off the shelf. I gave her an index card. She copied the recipe onto the index card, and she gave the index card to her friend so that her friend could bake the cake at her house. So the cookbook was kind of like the DNA, because the DNA stays in the nucleus, and just like my cookbook is not leaving my house, I'm going to keep it in my kitchen. But she copied the recipe onto an index card, which is kind of like the role that the RNA is playing, okay? And then the child took the index card to her kitchen and made the cake. And so her kitchen would kind of be like the ribosome, and when she made her own cake, it would kind of be like the protein. When you move from DNA to RNA, that's called transcription. And then when you go from RNA to protein, that's called translation, okay? This green circle is our nucleus, okay? This right here is our DNA, and it's being unwound, okay? This single strand right here is the mRNA. So we have unzipped the DNA a little bit to copy this gene, okay? Now this RNA, this mRNA, can leave the nucleus, and it can come out here to this blue bubble, which is the ribosome. The ribosome starts reading the RNA, and we use these weird things right here, these are called tRNAs, to put our protein together, okay? Proteins are polymers of amino acids, okay? So that means that all these little green circles have to be put together in the correct order to make this protein, and the tRNAs do that for us, okay? So in here, what we've got going on is transcription, and out here is translation, okay? So once again, the mRNA comes to the ribosome, and then the tRNAs actually put the protein together. Now, when you're looking at your codon tables, remember that you have to use your mRNAs when you look up information in your table, okay? You have to use your mRNAs. Moving on to competency 6, this is classification and evolution. So this one is the third competency that has 7 questions in it. We need to know our domains, the difference in organic and chemical evolution, and then you got to know your scientist. So your modern classification system was developed by Linnaeus, and he had kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Now we know that there's a bigger category up here called domain. Remember that if you're in the same family, you're in the same order, and same class, and same phylum, and same kingdom, and same domain, okay? If you're in the same class with something else, you're in the same phylum, and you're in the same kingdom, and you're in the same domain, okay? So it all kind of goes, it's kind of like a pyramid. When we looked at our evolutionary timeline, okay, so Linnaeus gave us the classification system. Lamarck was the guy that Darwin looked at. Lamarck was the one that said that organisms changed in their lifetime, so he was the giraffe guy. And so Darwin looked at him, and that kind of got him to thinking that organisms would change over time. Malthus, remember, is your math guy. Malthus was the one that said that, you know, all the resources on Earth would run out and we would all die. But still, that got Darwin to thinking about limiting factors. Lyell was your geologist, and he said that the Earth was a lot older than anyone ever thought. And so Darwin put all those pieces of information together, and he came up with natural selection. All right. After Darwin developed his theories, remember, then Wallace did the same thing. Wallace was a lot younger than Darwin. When Wallace figured his theory out, which was the same as what Darwin had, he told Darwin about it, and remember, they published around the same time, okay? When you look at chemical evolution, remember that's your Big Bang Theory. So Oparin and Haldane threw out the hypothesis that all the primitive gases in Earth's atmosphere were sparked by lightning or something, and that probably created macromolecules and whatnot. Miller and Urey were the ones that tested it, okay? Darwin's theory is survival of the fittest. He actually called it descent with modification. But I think survival of the fittest makes the most sense to everyone, and it's the driving force behind evolution. So this is a picture we've looked at before. So you say you have these bugs, and they're eating, you know, all of this person's crops. Well, you know, the farmer comes in and he sprays insecticides. It kills all of them but this strong survivor, because you see this one has a mutated gene, okay? What happens is this survivor can now start reproducing, you know, and repopulating. And so that's literally what survival of the fittest is. Your traits are good, you live, and you have babies that have your same traits. Now, the thing is, this organism did not adapt during its lifetime. It was born like this. So you cannot adapt, you know. So if I move to Siberia, I'm not going to grow more body hair to keep me warm, okay? I'm going to stay exactly as I am, okay? And so you have to think about that with regard to organisms. They are born with their adaptations. Natural selection happens naturally and artificial doesn't. So artificial selection is selective breeding. And that's how we have all the different dogs that we have, all the different breeds. Because people intentionally bred dogs. Remember, all dogs are related to wolves, right? They're descended from wolves. So we have natural selection and artificial selection. Okay. I know that was long. I hope that you made it all the way through the video. It is really important that y'all study and that you prepare. Go back through your papers that I gave you. Use the games in Kahoot. I sent out an announcement recently giving you a study plan that tells you what to do by competency. Okay, so of course your test is Tuesday, May the 15th. Get to school early. Bring all of your test preps with you that morning. I will take them up from you. After the test is over, we'll have an ice cream party or something in class to celebrate. But it is really important that y'all do your part, and you've still got time. I know many of you have been procrastinating and you haven't been working like you should, but I promise you it'll be worth it. When you walk into that test room and you sit down and you start answering questions and you know the answers to them, it's going to feel so good. You don't want to sit down and not know the answers. So it's really not that much to study. Just please do your best. I mean, it's really important to you and to me and to everybody that we put our best effort into this. Okay, so I appreciate what you're doing. I know that you're probably sacrificing and giving up doing some fun things that you wanted to do today or perhaps this weekend. So just know that your efforts are definitely appreciated, and they really are going to pay off. And it'll feel so good when you get your scores back and you see the outcome of all your hard work. Okay, so thank you again for what you're doing. If you have any questions, send me an email. I'm going to try to open up some chats over the weekend at different times. I'll let you know about those so that you can ask a few questions here and there. Okay? All right, just do your best. And I believe in you. I know you can do it.